Hi there, Brother Jack here. You may be wondering what the coronavirus has to do with the mark of the beast. In this video, I'm going to try to explain how we are a step closer to the fulfillment of this prophecy, possibly a big step. In a nutshell, I believe that China plays a key role in the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, that the Antichrist himself will either come out of China or use China in a big way. Remember, the mark of the beast is the devil's or Antichrist's mark. China appears to be leading the way in different key areas, which I'll be touching on in this video. In the process, China is paving the way for this mark, and perhaps more importantly, the will to receive it. In recent years, we have experienced many wars and rumours of wars, some of the biggest earthquakes ever, and a host of pestilences, from Ebola to locust plagues, and now this new coronavirus. All of these are listed in a prophecy from Jesus in Matthew 24. However, what Bible prophecy dwells on the most has to do with a world government which appears to assume power immediately after these predicted sorrows. This government is able to establish a worldwide system of social and economic control that pretty much everyone accepts. That is where the new coronavirus may be instrumental in helping to usher in such a government. I personally believe that a solution to the coronavirus will be found, mainly because I feel that the whole concept of the beginning of sorrows that Jesus mentioned seems to fit into a bigger scenario where a popular world leader is going to be able to gain control of the world because he offers solutions to the many problems that face the world at this point in history. These problems include climate change and the coronavirus pandemic. I believe that China is going to convince the world that it has the answers to both of these problems. Ironically, China appears to be both the most likely source of pandemics and the biggest contributor to climate change. So this prediction is not something that the average citizen would assume. It is, in fact, quite contrary to present assumptions. However, we need to refrain from interpretations of Bible prophecy which build too heavily on newspaper headlines. We need to be prepared to look behind the headlines and to weigh that up in relation to what the Bible actually does predict. In the Bible, there are many prophecies about a final world government, and some of these prophecies just happen to use the same animal descriptions that are used by the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. The prophecies indicate that a bear, Russia, will pluck the wings of an eagle, the US. When this happens, it effectively cancels out any effect that a lion, the UK, or an animal with rooster wings, France, might have previously had on either the bear or a dragon, China, which is also referred to as the devil himself. Then, in league with the 10 rotating members of the Security Council, the bear, Russia, and the dragon, China, will be able to control the whole world. This alliance between the new world leader and the 10 kings or kingdoms is precisely how it would work in today's world if 1 or 2 members of the UN Security Council acquired control of the council. This is where I want you to consider quite a different scenario coming out of the present panic over the new coronavirus. Here it is in as few words as possible. China is doing everything right with regard to controlling this outbreak. China is showing itself to be far more responsible in handling this crisis than any other world government. So let's look at the cold, hard facts. This is what we know about how China behaved by comparison to most Western countries. China quickly locked down the entire city of Wuhan, and later they locked down the entire province. We, the rest of the world, did not lock down a single country until months after the outbreak. Yes, they kept their international borders open, but so did everyone else. China was not worried about infected people coming in from elsewhere, but we should have been, and we were not. China issued masks and required everyone to wear them. We did not. China built new hospitals in record time. We did not. China tested everyone. We did not. China forced isolation in government facilities for everyone with so much as a fever. We did not. China patrolled the streets, spraying disinfectant everywhere. We did not. Everywhere else, it's all about economics. In other words, the West is primarily concerned with making money and with not upsetting the status quo. The reason the governments in places like the United Kingdom and Australia have been so slow to act decisively is because they didn't want to upset parents, teachers, shopkeepers, and everyone else who is part of the whole overall economy. Be calm and pretend nothing is happening has, until very recently, more or less been the rule of the day. Just like we did with HIV, we're now doing with climate change. We stick our heads in the sand and hope that someone else will come up with a solution that doesn't upset the economy. Thousands of people died while waiting for such a solution for AIDS, and it could easily be the same with this new coronavirus. So what I am saying is that whether or not the pandemic ever comes under control, it is China who has shown the world what is needed to stop such an outbreak, if it is going to be stopped at all. In the worst possible scenario, China has at least bought us more time. They were also quick to locate the source of the outbreak and to inform governments all over the world of the genome DNA data that would be necessary if we were to find a successful vaccine. All China needs to do now is to find a solution for climate change, and it is quite likely that the masses of the world would be happy to turn away from their indecisive, democratically elected leaders in favour of an apparently benevolent dictatorship that has the courage to make hard decisions that would provide the greatest possible protection for the greatest number of people. This will include a worldwide monetary system, in other words, the mark of the beast. Such a change in our attitude towards China is when the deeper message of Bible prophecy will kick in. Matthew 24 says that false prophets and Christs will appear in the last days that would, if possible, deceive even the very elect. In other words, most people, apart from the very elect, are going to fall for the Antichrist system. Through unprecedented circumstances and conditions, the tide of popular opinion will turn in support of a dominant world power and a dominant human leader to wield this power. The world's population is already being primed to accept a global dictatorship. China is already dictating the way in key areas, like technology and surveillance. Their social credit system, which we've produced a video about some months ago, enables the government to effectively monitor the public and assess their behaviour patterns. Could the coronavirus outbreak and climate change emergency provide the necessary conditions for Western support of Communist China? Don't we want to know who the good guys are, who have registered their personal health data, and who the bad guys are who haven't? Is fear the real pandemic that will pave the way for the masses to sign over more of their freedoms and to accept strong governance in order to clear up the mess? An article from The Guardian from early March 2020 alluded to a new normal, that China's excessive coronavirus public monitoring could be here to stay and replicated in other countries. The Bible warns that someone is going to offer a solution to a global crisis of some sort in exchange for total control of the world's population, and the public is going to fall for it. We may, unfortunately, have little choice. We may need someone who can convince us that they have a foolproof plan to save the planet, and that they have the strength to silence anyone who stands in the way of them implementing that plan. I believe that over the next few years, the world is going to turn more and more to Communist China for help with solving the climate crisis and now the coronavirus crisis. Of course, to do that, we would need to give China the power to act in what we might all consider to be the best interests of the world as a whole, even if that means the destruction of America and a communist control of the United Nations, which Bible prophecy warns will happen, as mentioned earlier. Everything is coming together, and things are happening faster than most of us can keep up with. The fact that the Bible reveals so much about what is happening in the world today should make all of us consider the possibility that the human race is moving toward a final showdown with our Creator. The latest update is that the most populous country in the world apparently has the virus totally under control in their own country now. while such comparatively tiny countries as Italy have actually surpassed the total number of deaths that occurred in China. Each day that passes, more and more countries are moving toward the same incriminating dilemma, despite all of us having had many weeks more warning than China had. Could it be that China has actually found a cure? Could it be waiting until the rest of us get desperate enough to hand over control in exchange for that cure? Could it be that the destruction of America is already happening, right before our eyes? The only place on the earth that's literally named Babylon is a suburb of Long Island, New York, not far from the New York Stock Exchange. New York City, home to the United Nations, is now in lockdown. Land of the free? Home of the brave? Or a country under siege? This is happening in a country which is infamous for having more privately owned guns than it has citizens, and where there is a sizable portion of the population that has been storing up weapons and other survival gear for such a scenario as this. Preppers all over America have literally trained themselves to use those weapons to protect their own private food sources from marauding neighbours, if not to rob food from others who find themselves in a similar situation. America has the ability and the temperament to literally destroy itself while China never fires a shot. Meanwhile, China's economy is taking off once again. Most people who lived through the Great Depression have horror stories to tell, but a few individuals with enough cash to back themselves up made a fortune, simply because labour was so cheap and because they could buy almost anything for very little cash. Everyone else's desperation was their opportunity. Well, China seems to be in that position at the moment. The fall of America may have already begun, and the mark of the beast may be one crucial step closer. When people only show interest in God as a way to avoid unpleasantness, it misses the point of God asking in the first place for people to take up their crosses, as Jesus put it, in order to die for Him and for others. If we don't align ourselves with God and His plan, we end up aligning ourselves by default with the system, with whoever shouts the loudest and acts the toughest. That is looking more and more like communist China. What we're shouting on this channel is come die with us. Whether it's dying daily to our various selfish dreams and ambitions, or dying literally as martyrs, God wants us to get a vision of an eternal and heavenly kingdom, which is far more real than the materialism that has trapped all of us in the past, and far more powerful than any worldly power, no matter how brutal and efficient like China. Please do write to us and share a little bit about your own situation. We will do our best to support you through emails while we have the ability to do so, and let us all pray for wisdom and love as we seek God's will for the weeks and months ahead.